Okay, welcome everybody. And we're actually kicking off our new series of webinars. We're calling it CISO Heroes. I'm Howard Silverman, VP Marketing at MazeBolt. Before we get started, just a couple of quick housekeeping items. Please use the Q&A option in the Zoom menu below to submit any questions you might have. We'll try and get to them, although this is a short session, so we may follow it up with an email in case we don't get to it. We will be sharing the recording of this session. We'll send that as well after today's session. And obviously you can share the link with any of your colleagues. We have a lot to cover today, so I'm going to jump right in. So today we're excited to be sharing the key findings from our latest survey report, the state of DDoS defenses. I'm joined by Eliza Israel, cyber evangelist at MazeBolt. Eliza spearheaded this survey and is going to help us unpack the key findings.
Okay, thank you, Howard, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Great to be sharing this survey report with you. And let's dive right in. For starters, I'd just like to start by sharing what the goal was of the survey. And I'd say that we were basically looking for three different things. Number one, to learn about the experiences that CISOs and other senior security leaders are having when it comes to damaging DDoS attacks. Number two, to see how security leaders feel about traditional DDoS testing methods. And three, to see whether they feel DDoS protection solutions really are doing their job. Now, in terms of the timing, in the past, DDoS attacks relied quite heavily on brute force tactics. Today, AI can enable threat actors to adjust DDoS attacks in real time based on the target environment's defenses, and we're seeing attacks of record-breaking volumes as well. And against this backdrop, we decided to interview CISOs and other security leaders about how they perceive their current DDoS defenses. There were three important conditions to be a respondent and participate in the survey. Number one, all of the respondents have deployed DDoS protection. So we know that they understand that having protection against DDoS attacks is essential. Number two, the respondents confirmed that they conduct some kind of DDoS testing. And finally, as I said before, the respondents were either CISOs or they were network security leaders.
Great. So obviously survey demographics is really key. So let's just quickly run through who was interviewed, what type of companies, and specifically why.
Yeah. So we wanted to hear specifically from banking, financial services, and insurance industries. You can see it here because they provide critical online services and they support large customer bases. They're prime targets for DDoS attacks, and even a brief disruption can lead to significant financial loss, can erode customer trust, impact regulatory obligations. So all of our respondents were from the BFSI industry. In terms of location, you can see here that respondents came from across Europe and the United States. Enterprise size varied. The minimal size for a company that was included in the survey is 500 employees, but we do have companies as large as 25,000 employees. And similarly with annual revenue, the minimum annual revenue to be included in the survey is $250 million. But many of the respondents were in companies of $1 billion or more of annual revenue. And finally, you can see here, 50% of the respondents were chief information security officers, and the rest were either a VP network security or director network security.
So to summarize, Elisa, basically we're saying that these are people that, in the entire kind of portfolio of security concerns, DDoS is very much up there and also very much focused on the enterprise, financial services, businesses. Really, let's dive into the details. Yeah, I think we're going to find some really interesting results that came out from there.
Okay, so we started off by asking survey participants about the number of damaging DDoS attacks that they experienced. And we discovered that enterprises continue to be attacked. All of our respondents reported experiencing at least one damaging DDoS attack in the last 12 months. You can see here in this bar graph, 13% of our respondents suffered from one damaging DDoS attack, 60% had between 2 and 5 attacks, and 27%, so that's more than a quarter, had more than 5 attacks. But we can see based on these numbers that enterprises are facing a recurrent issue. This isn't a one-time problem. And part of what's contributing to the sheer number of damaging DDoS attacks is the fact that AI enables attackers to process and analyze vast volumes of network traffic to identify vulnerabilities that might otherwise go undetected.
Actually, the number that really jumps out to me on this slide is actually the leftmost part of the graph, which is out of the 300 professionals that we interviewed, we got surveyed, none of them said they weren't being attacked.
That's right.
So on one hand, all of them have deployed a DDoS protection solution for the enterprise. And we all know that the main vendors, Akamai, Radware, Cloudware, and others, they're all being deployed, have been deployed in the market, yet we're still seeing that these attacks, and we're gonna peel out the what an attack really means and what damage really means in the coming slides. So let's dive in.
You're 100% Howard here that 100% of the respondents had a damaging attack in the last 12 months, damaging DDoS attack. Okay, so then the next question is the degree of damage. How bad was it? So we're looking at data from the last 2 or 3 years and looking at the first pie chart here of all our respondents, all 300 respondents. So you can see here that 58% of respondents suffered moderate damage from a DDoS attack in the last 2 to 3 years. 34%, that's the pink, suffered 34%, suffered severe damage, and 8% suffered extensive damage. Now, when we dug a little bit deeper into the data, we discovered that if you pull out just the largest enterprises, if you look here on the pie chart on the side here, so this represents data just for the largest enterprises, 10,000 to 25,000 employees. And you'll notice that whereas when we looked at all respondents, 8% suffered extended damage. When you look at this pie chart of the largest enterprises, 18%, so that's 3 times the number, suffered extensive damage. So larger enterprises were 3 times more likely to suffer the most extensive type of DDoS damage.
Yeah, from this, we see that damage is still persistent. But let's uncover a little bit more. What do organizations actually, what do they mean when they say extensive damage? So let's dive into a little bit more of the detail of what damage actually means to these types of enterprises.
Okay, so I'm just going to preface this slide by saying that every organization has its own ways of defining severity of damage. So we allowed for that in the survey, and each respondent answered as per his or her own organizational guidelines. But just to provide insight into what these various terms could mean, here's a definition of what could be meant by moderate, severe, and extensive. And you can see here that we're going to look at 2 different ways of measuring impact. The first is financial. Moderate impact would be up to $100,000 in indirect costs. Severe would be up to $1 million. And extensive would be up to 10 million or more, including fines and long-term losses.
In this case, we all know that BFSI is a highly regulated on the whole industry. When we're getting into this area of regulatory scrutiny, that could have a big impact on company processes and, in the extreme case, potential fines. But this is not something that would be taken lightly by an organization's board.
100%. So just to look at the second way of measuring impact, which is business continuity in this case, moderate would be a short disruption, which could be up to an hour. Severe would be a multi-hour outage. And extensive here, to define it fully, is over 24 hours of downtime, business critical systems offline, crisis management, long-term reputational damage. So this really shows how extensive damage is, and the 8% that we saw previously is now in fuller context.
Okay, so before we continue, let's actually do a polling question. What we often do with our webinars is actually test and see what the audience here today things and then contrast and compare with the actual survey. So I'm going to launch our first survey, and please, the survey is obviously anonymous. We don't see who's answering what. Please take a couple of minutes and just answer, how often does your organization test its DDoS defenses? And we can then compare that with how the survey recipients did it. And while we're waiting, I just want to just give a bit more context. Is why is testing actually important? And from our experience, obviously, MazeBolt is in this space. DDoS protections are really only as good as how they're configured. And testing is really the only way in which you can uncover misconfigurations that could lead to vulnerabilities. And as we see, we all know you're in network security systems, and networks are ever more complicated. And just because you tested once and saw how often people are testing, it doesn't mean that in another 2 or 3 months' time that new issues come up. So this is just giving you an idea, in case it wasn't clear, why people actually do testing. Okay, so I'm going to end the poll, and let's share the results. What do you think, Eliza?
Very interesting. Very interesting.
So yeah, basically, out of the audience here today, we've got 44% testing once a year, and then 22% less than once a year, and 22% more than twice a year. So well done to you, the folks that are testing regularly. And I also see here that there are some that also don't test at all. Okay, hopefully after this session, and once you download the full report, you'll think again about that. But very good. Okay, so we'll see how the CISOs responded in this survey in a few minutes, but let's keep going.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting to see what the participants here, what you all selected, and compare it to the results. The results here, you can see everyone here, for starters, conducts DDoS testing, right? But it's the way that it's being done that is the problem. So just having a look at the slide and comparing it to the poll results, here we've got 14% test twice a year. So that's a little different than the poll results. 63% once a year. That's the vast majority from the survey. And 23% test less than once a year.
Yeah, so obviously from the survey, at least, there's very sporadic testing frequency. So the question is, why is that? I would guess that at least one of the payoffs with testing is visibility. So let's go another step and look how people reacted to the actual level of tests and depth of testing that was done by our recipients. Yeah, this is my slide, so I'll carry on. So what we're seeing basically in this slide is that the number of people that are actually doing testing is very low. And in terms of the number of actual tests that are done when the testing is done, we can see that, for example, 30% of people are only doing 1 to 24 tests, only 30%. And if you go up from there, 25 to 49 is only 28%, 50 to 99 is 25%. And then people are doing over 100 actual tests is at 17%. And the issue that we find is that that's really only covering maybe 1 or 2% of the entire attack surface. It's not just how often you're testing, but it's also how many tests or simulations you're doing.
How many you're not doing.
Exactly. So because you're actually not doing enough testing, you're certainly leaving a lot of blind spots. People often talk about visibility, and this definitely shows from the results that there's a general lack of visibility. And that obviously then has a big impact on the other side, which is, okay, so there are hidden vulnerabilities and they're actually resulting in attacks that cause damage. All right, so we now have our second survey. Let me just 1 second, just pull it up. Second. So the second survey is, what is the biggest barrier to testing more frequently? Okay, because this is a key thing. Okay, we understand that people aren't testing that often, and when they are testing, they may not actually be testing enough. So one of those was barriers. And so please answer as honest as you can. Like I said, it's the idea here is to compare the audience response from the actual the survey, and we'll get an idea of how people are reacting to the impact of testing in their organizations. Okay, good. Can see we've give it another 10 seconds. Can see there's some interesting results. Definitely different from the survey, but that doesn't matter. That's okay. All right, I'm going to end the poll and we can just see the results. And yeah, this certainly, the fact that 67% of people on this webinar, they're the biggest impact or the barrier for testing more frequently is the maintenance window. And we know that the maintenance window typically is done in the middle of the night on the 30th or 31st of December. It's when there's very little general business activity, but it's very disruptive to normal business operations. Also, yeah, a couple of people said they didn't have budget allocated. Okay, certainly in the reports in the survey, everyone was saying, yes, we do some kind of testing. So there is obviously budget allocated. When you talk about budget, maybe it's headcount, people that are actually going to be doing some reconfiguration, and also some people saying not a priority. Okay. So it sounds like you've come to this session to learn more. So good on you for joining.
Should we see how this compares?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay. So thank you everyone who responded to the poll. Here's what we saw from the survey. Disruption to live production services emerged here as the biggest issue, as it did in the poll that we conducted just now. But it's not the only issue that comes up. What we found, the fact that test results become outdated quickly was a significant issue, 11%. And that's because the type of DDoS testing traditional DDoS testing that the respondents are doing, it gives you point in time data. So it becomes outdated very quickly. The second something changes, a change is made to the configuration of the network, the data may no longer be accurate, and you don't know at that point. So the fact that test results become outdated quickly in light of the fact that you need a maintenance window in order to do the testing is a huge challenge. And then the last one here that also received 11% of the votes is limited attack vector coverage. That's what we discussed earlier, that people are able to test, typically less than 100 attack vectors, some up to 200, but either way, it's a very small percentage of the attack surface. So most of the attack vectors are untested. All right. So another key issue that came up in the survey relates to automation. And when the industry talks about automated DDoS protection, what we're saying is that DDoS attacks are stopped without requiring manual intervention. That means without requiring the triggering of service level agreements at all. Having said that, none of our respondents said 0% said that they have fully automated protection, meaning everyone relies on triggering SLAs. 63%.
Let me just clarify. The SLA is triggered when there's an attack, but
Yes.
I think it's the SLA is like the ultimate reaction to an attack. But all of them, I think, say that they see that there is a manual intervention at some stage, maybe before or after an attack.
Okay, so it could depend. So 63% said that their protection is mostly automated with some manual oversight. 25% said their protection is half automated and half manual. And 12%, and again, these are large enterprises using premium DDoS protection solutions, said that their protection is mostly manual with some automated support.
Yeah, so that would explain why damaging downtime continues, even for enterprises that have invested, frankly, with premium protection. An attack should be stopped without any intervention, either from the SecOps team or from the DDoS vendor. But these kind of backup steps are still being triggered. So the question is, what can enterprises do in order to mitigate or minimize future risk and try and overcome the limitation of non-automation. And this is a good segue to the next slide, which is investment.
So that's exactly what we're seeing, is that responding to damaging attacks, enterprises are increasing their investment in DDoS protections. And we see that if you look at the budget for 2025 as compared to the budget for 2024, let's have a look at this pie chart over here. So 53%, the majority of enterprises increased their DDoS protection budget between 1% and 5%, and 32% increased by more than 5%. So that's a total of 85% that increased their DDoS budget in 2025. Now, you have to view that in context of this next pie chart over here, which shows confidence level after increasing DDoS investment, because there seems to be a myth regarding increasing investment in DDoS protection and, on the other hand, increased confidence in the level of resilience. Budgets for DDoS protection are increasing, that we know for sure, but does the extra spend lead to the desired results? If we have a look at the data here, 6% of our respondents said even after increased spend, they're not confident that their DDoS protection solutions can stop damaging DDoS attacks. 89%, that's the vast majority, said that they're somewhat confident. And only 5% said that after the increased investment, they are very confident. They are fully confident in their DDoS protections.
That's really quite outstanding. I have to admit that we had a hint, or we thought that this would give it an indication, but really there's definitely a gap between what people think they can do in order to really mitigate the risk or the threat from DDoS. So really this takes us more or less we've got another 5+ minutes to go, but it takes us to, like, what do CISOs actually want? Are they interested in exploring new strategies for DDoS resilience? That's the question that like the final question here.
Okay. So we can see that on the one hand, most security leaders lack in-depth awareness of continuous DDoS testing. And what I mean by that is continuous DDoS testing that does not require a maintenance window on the live production environment. The advantage of continuous testing that does not require a maintenance window is that it's non-disruptive. It doesn't impact the live environment. And that way, you can conduct much more extensive attack simulations. This paves the way for real DDoS resilience. So having said that, 32% of respondents said, I've heard the term, but I know very little about it. 59% said they have a basic awareness of the concept, but not much more than that. And just 9% said that they understand it deeply and know what it entails. So not so many people know what it means, continuous DDoS testing that does not require a maintenance window. On the other hand, when asked about the value of automated DDoS reporting that provides information about DDoS misconfigurations and vulnerabilities, you can see here that the vast majority, 69%, said that they find that concept somewhat valuable, and 28%, which is quite a high number, find it highly valuable.
Yeah, we're coming close to the top of the hour. I think what we should do now is let's like take a look at the some of the key takeaways. And in the time that we've had, we haven't actually scratched much beyond the tip of the iceberg. But let's just quickly run through the final takeaways that we thought were particularly interesting to share with you today.
So, key takeaways from the discussion today and from the report: nearly all the respondents reported suffering damaging DDoS attacks in the past 12 months. Nonetheless, 86% test just once a year or less. Number two, 42% of respondents disclosed having severe or extensive DDoS damage. Number three, 63% say their DDoS protections are mostly automated. And at the same time, 99% still rely on manual intervention. Number four, 83% say that they are testing less than 100 attack simulations, which leaves thousands of potential entry points exposed. And finally, although only 9% are familiar with the concept of continuous non-disruptive testing, 97% see value in this approach. So just to wrap up, the message is clear that despite heavy investment, enterprises are still suffering damaging DDoS downtime because testing today tends to be too infrequent, too narrow in scope, and too disruptive to live production services.
Yeah, in fact, just a question came in. Can I just go back to the previous slide?
Sure.
Just wanted So this idea of maintenance windows, many companies say that there's no way we're going to do more than 1 or 2 maintenance windows in an entire year. There is another approach. You can do continuous non-disruptive testing that doesn't interfere at all with any kind of business continuity. That's the good news. We can certainly see from these key takeaways that there's definitely a job in raising the awareness that there is an alternative. We've literally got one minute left, but it's clear from this report, and in the chat, I've shared the link, that DDoS is still a big issue for CISOs in the enterprise, and they are looking for other solutions. And let's just not forget that DDoS is top of mind and probably will be continuing to be top of mind for the foreseeable future. And just literally in the last week and days, we've seen issues with travel and ticketing systems in Europe being severely impacted by potentially DDoS. National elections in Moldova came under attack just yesterday. And early in the month, Cloudflare reported a record-breaking DDoS attack in terms of its volume. Very interesting data points here. I hope you found it useful. We did one final thing that I'll just share now in the chat and we haven't really had a chance to really get into a lot of detail, but I'll share the link here. So we have an ebook around the challenges of AI in DDoS and DDoS protection. Please feel free to download that ebook as well. Thanks very much for joining. I hope you found the session interesting, and please stay tuned for our next webinar.
Thank you, everyone.